Hi, welcome to the COVID313 Coalition for Families and Students. We're really excited to have you here today. Apologize for our late start. There were technical issues, ones that we have never experienced in the 82 weeks that we have been coming to you every Thursday. I'm Christine Bell. I am honored to serve as the Executive Director of Urban Neighborhood Initiatives. I'm a proud partner of the coalition. And I'm also a mom of 3 small children. So I am really excited about the show today. We've got great guests to talk with us about the kid vaccine that was just released for COVID-19. This is always a two-way conversation. So we want to hear from you. We have Lindsay and Brooke monitoring our Facebook chat. So please, ask your questions, share your comments, and we will share them with the experts. But before we get started, we need to get everybody to the right place. Christina, could you please come on and give us details on how to listen to the Spanish interpretation?
Good afternoon. My name is Cristina Guzmán. Buenas tardes. Cristina Guzmán. Si quieren asistir a la charla en español, vayan al Facebook de Urban Neighborhood Initiatives de UNI, o hay un enlace en el chat donde ustedes pueden escuchar en español. Gracias.
Christina, thank you so much for being here. We're so grateful for you. And we have 2 ASL interpreters, Laura and Katsian, and they want to thank you for joining us today on the webinar. They'll be interpreting on the screen throughout the webinar. We are also recording the video with closed captioning to view later. So I am going to now pass it on to Rajeshri, who is going to introduce our guests and also has a little something special for us. So Rajeshri.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today is Diwali, so happy Diwali. Diwali is a 5-day festival of lights and is celebrated by Hindus, Sikhs, and Jains, which account for actually nearly 20% of the world's population. Diwali is a festival of new beginnings and the triumph of good over evil and light over darkness. Today's day 3 and is the actual Diwali day. And so tonight we will perform a ceremony dedicated to Goddess Lakshmi, who's the goddess of wealth, asking for health and prosperity in the new year, which begins tomorrow on day 4 of the festival. The 5th day is a special day honoring the relationship between brothers and sisters. One of the main beliefs about Hinduism in general is that truth is one and paths are many. And by this, I mean, whether you say hello, hola, or bonjour, the message is the same, and that there is far more that unites us than separates us. As we think about the triumph of evil, of good over evil and light over darkness, and we conclude one challenging year and begin another in which there is hope, and that we will talk about later today, it's even more important for us to remember that we are all one and we rely on each other to behave in a manner that honors the needs of our entire community. We're in this together and we will triumph together. I wish you all a very happy Diwali and encourage you to take to heart the message from Governor Gretchen Whitmer that we are now going to share in the chat. Thank you so much, and I'm going to pass it back to Christine. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for Jayashree. And I think that actually Jametta is next up, who is another one of our co-moderators, and she is going to do the introductions of our very special guests today on the town hall. Jametta?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Christine, and our wonderful ASL and Spanish interpreters. And Rajeshri, you really set the tone of what is the underlying philosophy of all of the work that we have been doing with you families. And that is to give information and resources, because we really are one together in combating not only COVID, but combating all the underlying conditions that don't let us thrive and keep our children behind. But speaking of children and speaking of our health, it's really important for us to get a better understanding, and we've been hearing about it, are the long haulers, the long-term effects that we have been hearing about with COVID. Now some more than 18 months having been in the pandemic. And to help us get a better understanding of that, we're really so pleased to have Dr. Radhika Pasuy, who is a professor of endocrinology at University of Michigan in internal medicine. And we are so pleased to have you join us. Welcome.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. And first of all, I would also like to extend my thanks to Christine and to you, Jameta, for inviting me to be part of this very important forum. I would also like to thank you all for attending and, trying to get the most information that can help both patients and their family to understand these complex situations that we've been facing now for almost 20 months. And it's truly an honor to be part of this amazing program. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you hit that word. You said complex. So give us some insight, if you would. What is it that you have been seeing in your clinic? What are some of the complexities, and what does long-term complications mean for the rest of us that are trying to understand these complex issues?
Right. So first of all, I'd like to highlight that in the last 20 months, we, of course, have faced quite a constantly moving situations as far as healthcare and healthcare delivery is associated with this pandemic. And definitely we have learned a lot from the very first waves that we have seen here in Michigan, starting with March and April of 2020. And then as we have now kind of being at the end of the fourth wave, more and more information had become available and more tools became available for us to treat the acute condition. And I also like to highlight that initially all our efforts were to understand how to best treat these severe acute complications associated with the COVID-19. And at the University of Michigan Hospital, of the team I am part with, we have changed a lot, our strategies, and definitely that resulted in much better outcomes for patients. But as the disease progressed, it has emerged not only here in Michigan, but from other places that in fact, the acute condition, once is treated and people are discharged from the hospital, or even for those who may not have necessarily required to be admitted, appears to have lingering effects in some patients. And that initially wasn't very clear, how long does it take? Who are the people who may develop these conditions? In fact, we at Michigan have been focusing on the potential longer-term complications of COVID just because the mechanism, right, or let's say all this inflammation and autoimmunity that is generated by COVID has very similar effects with what, for instance, diabetes does in one body. And I like to highlight diabetes also, not because I have spent my career in understanding diabetes and fights its complication, but because also November, it's a very special month. It's the Diabetes Month, International Diabetes Month, yes. And particularly because today in 2021, we are celebrating a very important milestone, which is 100 years since insulin was discovered. And that's yet another example how science has been able to lead to treat effectively disease that was initially untreatable, right? So just by parallel. But eventually, as I mentioned, we learned that some people develop these lingering conditions, and we started to try to follow them and understand who may develop that. And as it's true in science, the beauty of being part of science is that sometimes initial observations need to be validated and may not necessarily be in line with we as physicians may predict it will happen. And that's exactly what has happened with this long COVID, because initially we thought that only people who get severe disease and are admitted in the hospital will develop these complications. But more recently, we've learned that in fact that it's not the case, that even people who may have had relatively mild disease that never required to be admitted in the hospital started to develop this long COVID. And I think that it's also maybe confusing for people because there are many terms that have been used to describe lingering effects of COVID. And among those, long COVID appears to be one of the most used one, or long hauler, or post-acute conditions, or post-COVID. But I think that indeed, all of them are describing more or less the same combinations of signs and symptoms that people may experience with long COVID or this more recent post-acute sequelae of COVID being the most used one. But what does it mean, right? Because that's important for everybody to understand. Well, it means that people who have had COVID, let's say after at least 3 months for post-COVID, continue to experience symptoms. And some of the symptoms may have not been at all experienced during the acute or the initial phase of the disease. And some of the symptoms are, this extreme fatigue or this fuzziness in the thinking process, the inability of, remembering some memory problems, the muscle weakness, inability of actually carrying on activities that used to be easily performed prior. Dizziness, loss of balance. Some people actually experience severe pains. And we know now that the COVID and particularly all this inflammation process that it's associated with COVID does affect several areas in the nervous system, both the brain and the periphery, and that pain can be actually very difficult to live with, and the weakness and the dizziness and loss of balance. But besides those signs and symptoms that are a little bit more obvious, there are additional consequences that in many patients go hand in hand, and that is the impact on the heart function, on the kidney function, as well as on the other aspects of the vasculature in the body. So this is in a nutshell.
Dr. Pasuy, I'm so sorry. But if I could, because we got backed up a little bit, and we absolutely hope everybody's heard the identification of those symptoms, that they can become chronic, which is the other piece I think that you shared with us. And thank you for lifting up that 100 years ago, people thought there was no resolution to diabetes, but science has changed that through anywhere from diphtheria, measles, we use vaccinations. Could you very quickly, in the last minute or so, if someone is experiencing these various symptoms, what should they do and how can they get help? How would they reach out to you?
Right. Great question. And I will try to go to the point. So first of all, we have developed a multidisciplinary post-COVID clinic that is active at the University of Michigan. We also have a website which describe the most important symptoms that are associated with this long COVID or post-COVID. And if people have more than one of these symptoms for more than 3 months, they are likely to have the condition. And then there are referral procedures through their primary care providers that can refer to this clinic. In addition, if there are less symptoms, many of the primary care physicians have received information on how to address some of the most prevalent, most frequent conditions associated with post-COVID. And some of these are done in association with some of the physical medicine and rehabilitation, if mainly pain or weakness or muscle, fatigue are the most important components. The PCPs also have information on how to perhaps identify some symptoms that may predict that maybe the heart or the kidney may be involved. And that is another reason, or the lungs, in the long term. So that's another way of actually having access to the specialists that are part of this multidisciplinary program, because we definitely do not want to miss anything that could have even more serious consequences in the long term.
Dr. Pasuy, we're going to need you to come back to talk more about this. There's no question. And so families, as we're listening, so we know that the clinic that Dr. Pasuy heads up, but we also heard her say very clearly, we need to be connected to a primary care physician. We need that for ourselves as adults. We need that for our children. And so I think, so first off, I want to thank you so much for being part of this discussion and shedding some light on something that we're continuing to better understand, because it was a phenomenon we didn't understand or even really know about a year and a half ago.
And I would also like to end by thanking you all, but also saying that the best way actually to address the long COVID is to get the vaccine so that you don't get COVID.
You knew my ending question, right? Perfect.
Yes,
so
and
vaccine,
in fact, initial data show that it seems that some of the symptoms are improving when people get vaccinated. Of course, that's too soon to the data. It's very, very early, but it's very important to understand that aspect.
Thank you so much. I think you've heard it again, folks, how critical vaccines are not only for our ongoing prevention, but also to mitigate the potential impact of long COVID. So we're going to switch right now. We've talked about some of the consequences. Let's talk about a preventative lens here. And so I'm going to ask Christine if she would come back, because we are so blessed and excited to have some of our top docs to share their expertise and their insights, not only in terms of infectious disease, but also as a pediatrician. What do parents need to know? Christine, you're a mom. Take it away.
Thanks, Jametta. So are you. I just happen to have young people in this age range.
Yeah, and I've got little people and grands, all that. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So we are really excited to have with us here today Dr. Ovetta Fuller. And she has been with us before. She is a professor at the University of Michigan, and she is a virologist. And we're really excited to have her here. And we also have Dr. Herman Gray, and he is the chair of the pediatrics department at Wayne State University School of Medicine. And has a long career in the medical field, and then we have Dr. Cunningham, who has been with us many times and is currently at the Henry Ford Health System, and he is the medical director for infectious disease with a specialization in pediatrics. And hopefully I got that all right in all the right orders. And so I'd like to start with Dr. Fuller, because Dr. Fuller, one of the very important pieces of her work, and that we're very thankful for, is she actually sits on the advisory board for the FDA that approves vaccines. And so I'm going to let Dr. Fuller start, because she has some really good information that she wanted to share with us. So Dr. Fuller, if you want to go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, thanks for having me back on 313 as you continue to do your work. So the FDA advisory committee called VRBPAC is the one that reviews the application after FDA has come through it and gathered their analyses. And so when we were looking at this, we were actually convened back in June to ask what would be needed so that families and others would have some assurance that any vaccine for a child would be safe and effective. And so we gave them some thoughts and guidelines, and they followed that. So we were able to look at data from over 3,000 children. Actually, the data had been looked at, but we were able to also get the results of how this the Pfizer vaccine at 1/3 of the dose of the adult vaccine. So adults get 30 micrograms per dose per shot. 5 through 11 will get 10 micrograms in 2 doses. And that actually reduces the likelihood of disease in children. We were concerned about side effects if any parent or grandparent or any adult would be, because these are children who have all their lives ahead of them. We care about everyone, but particularly in a developmental stage. And the data clearly show that the side effects initially are very low. Myocarditis, which had been a concern with the older kids, 12 through say 30 or 25 or so, particularly males, the data show that that is much less in occurrence, much less in occurrence. As a matter of fact, it occurs more often in non-vaccinated people for other reasons than it does as a side effect of vaccination. So we were encouraged with the safety and the protection. And then thirdly, we realized that COVID is actually, people say children don't get COVID. Well, it's in the top 10 of things that cause death among children this age. It's actually number 8, right there with suicide. So this is an issue. And we also know children, and my clinical colleagues can comment on the number of children they are seeing as rising in the clinics due to COVID-19. So we were really excited and careful at the same time to make sure that that it was as safe as the studies could show for anything we could look at. And then knowing that there's long-term surveillance, that anything that would be happening in the rollout will be picked up because it will be reported by people who are giving the vaccines and parents. So it's something we're hoping is going to help open up our society, give our kids a little bit more assurance in the things they need to do in schools, give parents a little bit more comfort, and help us all to get past this pandemic.
Wow, I knew that kids could get COVID. I had no idea that it was number 8 for causing death in children. I feel like I've been a little hesitant about whether I wanted to rush and get my children vaccinated. And I just feel like you gave me a piece of information to really weigh that risk. So thank you, Dr. Fuller. What I'd like to do now is I'm going to ask a question, and I will kick it to one of you, and then if others want to add, you can feel free to add in. So Dr. Gray, as a parent trying to make a decision, is getting the vaccine and the side effects worth the risk versus getting COVID MSID?
Well, thank you for the invitation to participate in this important discussion. And, just a shout out to Dr. Fuller for the important work that she does and continues to do, because we all talk about follow the science. Well, she's the personification of the science. I would say that, from a pediatrician's perspective, from a physician's perspective, much of what we do is weigh the risk and benefits of any kind of intervention, including immunizations. As a general pediatrician, I've given hundreds and hundreds of immunizations over the years. And, there used to be a time when, you'd have to discuss the new one coming out. How come we got to vaccinate against chickenpox? Everybody is okay with chickenpox. And everybody isn't okay with chickenpox, but the complications of chickenpox are rarer than the complications of COVID. We are in the midst of a global pandemic. It is all around us. There's no comparison between the risk of the vaccine and the risk of the disease, or a complication of the disease like the multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children. That is, a severe complication of a deadly viral illness. And if people are trying to weigh the science or weigh the benefits and the risk of the vaccine compared to the disease, I would say perhaps not trying to be patronizing at all, but just stating the facts as clearly and directly as possible. There is no comparison. The vaccine has been delivered to millions of people. The vaccine has been studied carefully before it was ever released. The vaccine has been approved by the FDA and the CDC in the last several days. This is technology, the messenger RNA technology of the vaccine that has been in existence for a decade or so. And so there's just really, not to beat this horse, into a little pulp, there is just no comparison in terms of what is the best approach for your children.
So Dr. Cunningham or Dr. Fuller, do you have anything to add to that? And then to Dr. Cunningham, I would ask, I have a question, but Dr. Fuller, Dr. Cunningham, do you have anything that you want to add? I feel like Dr. Gray was very clear.
I agree with everything he said. This vaccine is safe. It's been out over a year, or just about a year now. There's been hundreds of millions of doses given throughout the world. Small chance of a side effect or adverse reaction that's serious. And yet we've had in Michigan alone, over 22,000 people have died from COVID. So I am 100% behind this vaccine. And as you know, I've said previously, I have 2 teenagers, they're vaccinated.
Yes. So how are you, Dr. Cunningham, how are you talking with patients about the risks, about the vaccine? What do you think parents need to know?
Well, I think it's
in
the
addition
same
to what we just talked about.
It's the same message you're hearing here. COVID, it's not only children who can get very sick from it and a small number be hospitalized or, God forbid, die, but with many infectious diseases, kids go to school, they share their germs, they bring them home, and then they infect the vulnerable parents or grandparents or other extended relatives. So that's another reason. By vaccinating kids, we can cut down the number of cases in adults. And Michigan's had a lot of surges driven by outbreaks associated with school. Last spring, it was actually travel sports that was the major spread of the outbreak. So this is just another tool, along with masking, that's going to keep us safe.
That is very true. There are 2 schools, I believe, right now that are closed due to the amount of outbreaks that they have at the school. So thank you for that. Dr. Fuller, you talked a little bit about, and Dr. Gray, you alluded to this, but I guess what actually is in the vaccine? So it's a certain type of technology, but Dr. Fuller, maybe if you want to speak a little bit to what's in the vaccine, and maybe how does it then protect our children? If you could go just a little deeper on that.
Sure. So all of these vaccines have the same material ultimately that helps our body to recognize the real virus. The analogy I like to use is that if COVID is my hand with all 5 fingers, that's the virus. It has the genetic material, has proteins. When it gets in the body, it can cause this wide array of symptoms that we know that can lead to mild or moderate or even severe COVID and death. When we do the vaccine, we have a way of putting in just the thumb, if you will. So remember, the whole hand is the virus, but the thumb is the spike that actually binds the virus to cells. All viruses have to get in cells and reproduce. So it's just this little piece, and it's made on our own cells. And what that does is it allows our body to say, oh, that's not me. I'm going to make my host defense, my immune system, see that and prepare that every time I see that, I'm going to be able to mount a defense. So if I see the real virus that also has a thumb, I have already been prepared to be able to bind to this and keep it from entering my cells. And so it is carried to our own cells by a small piece of genetic material, not DNA like in our cells, but RNA, which is why it's called RNA vaccines. And so what that does is it primes, like all vaccines, like Dr. Gray said, chickenpox, measles, mumps, rubella, many vaccines, HPV, all say to our immune system, see this little thing such that when you see the real virus, you can handle it. And that's what's in it. And the technology has been around for years. It's been used in cancer therapy. And so it's now being used to stop COVID, to help us, our bodies be able to recognize the virus and stop it from getting into our lungs and getting to our bodies to cause those either immediate symptoms of COVID, which can lead to death or real sickness or real difficult time, or the long hauler symptoms that we heard about earlier. Highly effective.
Just a follow-up question for Dr. Gray, and I know that the science here tells us something different, but we do know that there's a set of folks that are part of why they don't want to get the vaccine, or they don't want to get their children vaccinated, is because they think that there is material in the vaccine that can cause side effects like autism. Could you just really, could you speak to that? I think we just need to say it out loud that you know, that is not actually something that's not a side effect. But could you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, you know, thank you for the question. There is certainly lots of misinformation out in the popular media, and this is one of those pieces of misinformation, certainly. And in some respects, to say an old play out of a worn out playbook, in the sense that the connection between childhood immunizations and autism has been theorized for many, many years and has been investigated extensively. And there still is no proof of there being any connection to autism. If you have a child with autism and or on the spectrum in some way, you are always looking, desperate for answers for how did this happen? Why did this happen? And I certainly don't minimize the importance of that. But the answer is not to latch on to disproven theories. There is no connection between this vaccine. As Dr. Cunningham suggested, there have been millions, indeed tens of millions, hundreds of millions of doses of this given. We have lots and lots of experience with this vaccine compared to many others, because in a short period of time, because of just the horrific nature of the pandemic and our efforts to try to protect the world. And so there is no connection, period.
So for a family, Dr. Gray, I just want to stay with you for a moment and then we'll go to Dr. Cunningham. But so what might be some of the side effects that a parent would see? So I'm going to go get Lewis and Quentin. They're my sons and they're old enough to get it. They fall in this age range. What might I see as a parent of what might the side effects be of this vaccine?
Yeah, the common side effects that you're likely to encounter are, the most obvious is soreness at the injection site, perhaps a little redness along with it. It may not occur right after the injection. It may be hours later or a day later or two, and lasts for a day or two and typically goes away. Your children may feel really particularly tired and just want to take a nap or to sleep, or just dragging, not themselves. Again, usually some hours after the vaccine is received, and in some respects, people even look at that as like good news. Interpret that as, well, your immune system is gearing up. It's preparing for battle. Watch out any COVID virus that shows up in this body, because you're going to find trouble here. And so you get fatigue and you may get a headache, from it. So you just kind of got the blahs for a day or two. But the likelihood of seeing any significant, really serious health threatening types of complications for the vaccine are very, very remote.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gray. So Dr. Cunningham, is the mRNA, I want to make sure I say that right, the mRNA technology that's currently used for this vaccine, for the COVID-19 vaccine, is it in any other youth vaccines?
So it is being used in making vaccines to treat cancer. If you ever on the news hear about immunotherapy, that is getting the body's own white blood cells that fight infections to attack cancer cells. And so that this is where the technology came from. Dr. Gray alluded to the fact it's been out for more than 10 years, this technology being used in humans. Very good track record of safety in cancer patients. It's actually close to miraculous what it's done for certain cancers, especially melanoma. So I have no concerns about this. The mRNA does not stay in your body long time. We break that down. We have things in our blood and in our cells. So it goes in, it does its job. It's the blueprints for our cell to make a protein that looks like the virus, so our body attacks it and then it goes away, but you still have this memory for protection.
Dr. Gray or Dr. Fuller, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that was very thorough. In the laboratory, we have to work hard to keep RNA from breaking down. So when it's in the body, it gets in the cells, it takes the message in, and then it falls apart as quickly as within 8 hours. So it doesn't stick around. It doesn't modify the body except to allow it to produce that spike protein, that film I showed you.
And this is why we keep the vaccine refrigerated before we use it, because the mRNA will break down very quickly at higher temperatures, like the temperature in a room, and our body temperature is even higher. So that's another way this breaks down quickly. So people worry it's going to get in and change your DNA. It doesn't even come close to the DNA. It's not a concern.
And Christine, you asked what was in it. There's also some salt and some sucrose, nothing toxic, no preservatives, none of those things are in the vaccine. So it's really this nucleic acid, the RNA, plus the buffers, which are like sugar and salt water, and nothing else.
And so it's literally just going into the body, breaking down in the body like, you know, like the food that we eat, right? It's
a droplet like Crisco oil or something like that, a lipid vesicle that has the RNA in it to get it to our cells. But other than that, there's nothing that's toxic to the body, or we would have, I mean, it's just not there.
Got it. Thank you. And thank you for the clarity. I feel like I've asked in the last 84 weeks that we've been doing this, I've asked this question quite a few times, and I feel like that's a very clear answer. So there's no preservatives in it. It's the mRNA that breaks down in your body within 8 hours. And that is just enough time for your body to figure out how to fight the disease, so that when you come in contact with the disease later, the body knows how to fight it, which is also why you can, I'm assuming this is also why you can still get COVID while vaccinated. You just won't die from COVID because your body knows how to fight it. Is that right?
Yeah, although most people will not get any symptoms at all. There is some breakthrough disease. If Israel did the Pfizer vaccine and got a large number of people vaccinated, 6 months after receiving the second dose of the vaccine, they had about 2.5% of healthcare workers came down with very mild cases of COVID. So that's where the 6 months for the booster doses comes from. But the vaccines, all three of them, are excellent at preventing hospitalization and death against every COVID strain that we have out there right now. These are some of the most effective vaccines. The only other ones that are this effective, it's probably smallpox and polio.
Thank you for that. That's really, that's great information. So I have two more questions. One is related to blood type. And so I think all of us, as we're living through COVID, you know, we've had experiences where maybe somebody has gotten, and this just actually recently happened to a friend of mine. She got COVID, her husband got COVID, her daughter got COVID, but her daughter that she was most concerned about and all of her decisions for the last, 2 years has been to protect her daughter who has an immunodeficiency, did not end up getting COVID. She has tested negative multiple times since the rest of the family tested positive. And so one of the things that came up as she was trying, and she was talking with her, some folks, it came up that that maybe her blood type had something to do with it. So does your blood type make a difference in contracting COVID?
I haven't seen
And I'm going to open that up. I don't actually know which one of you is best to answer that, so I'm not going to direct it.
Oh,
so
that's news to me.
Who wants to buzz in first?
News to me. I'm not aware of any literature on that.
Okay.
Everybody's smiling. So there was some early literature that suggested that people who are O positive may have less COVID, but that was a small study. I haven't seen, and it was in Europe. I haven't seen anything more recently. I can't say in any way with any assurance from the science point of view or any other that any blood type is protective against COVID-19. There probably are things that keep people from in the immune system that keep some people from getting infected, or the amount of virus you're exposed to but I don't know what they are. So I can't tell you that it's something to do with the blood type.
Dr. Gray, is there anything?
I would echo the comments of our two experts ahead of me. No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, the learning in real time has been really fascinating, right? So we've all been so worried about getting it, and then it comes that close, right, to your house, and maybe one person doesn't get it. And so it does make you wonder why, but outside of like, you know, a higher power keeping her safe. So in that example, right? So thank you. Go ahead.
May I just add things like getting rest, as well as making sure that you're not deficient in vitamin D, just being healthy, period. You know, less stress, doing the things that keep our immune system well allows it to be the best defense that it can be against not only COVID, but we have lots of other circulating things like RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, influenza. So we need a healthy immune system. And someone's healthy immune system will fight this off. In addition to the vaccine, it's really smart to stay well if you can. She may have just been more healthy because she had less stress in her life, you know?
You know, there are receptors for vitamin D on certain white blood cells. And there have been some studies in adults that having a good level of vitamin D is associated with lower all-cause mortality. I don't want people to rush out and take super high doses of vitamin D. You can just take whatever the recommended daily dose is as instructed on supplements. But I'm a big believer in that one. Out of all the alternative treatment messages out there, that's the one that has some truth to it.
And I think the worry about believing something like blood type as an example would be my concern would be is that people would then translate that to, oh, I'm O positive, so I'm going to be okay, and disregard effective prevention measures that we know work. And so, yes, I was laughing. Yes, I was smiling. But seriously, that would not be something that I would want to bet my health on.
So thank you. So I want to lift up keeping our immune systems healthy, and some of the ways in which you can do that is reduce stress, get rest, make sure that you're getting the vitamins and minerals you need. You could do that by taking a multivitamin. Is there any other suggestions that you all have for us to keep our immune systems, and particularly our kids? Let's focus it on kids, particularly keeping our kids' immune system strong. Like, for example, when they only eat 5 things, like my son.
I really encourage parents to get the fruits and vegetables in. Mother Nature has the best nutrition for us. Those fruits and veggies are loaded with lots of good things, including vitamin D. Milk in this United States, cow's milk, it's all fortified, which means they add vitamin D to it. Pretty much everyone in Michigan, we don't get enough sunlight. Our bodies can make vitamin D, but this far north, you need to get it from an outside source.
Dr. Gray?
For your picky eater, the old bald-headed pediatrician would simply say, "This too shall pass." And time will come when that appetite and the interest in other foods will be there. Don't worry about it. And certainly Dr. Fuller and Dr. Cunningham's advice on eating well, resting, getting plenty of sleep, all the things that your grandma probably taught you, when you were a youngster or your parents taught you, actually do make sense. We are blessed with marvelous human machines that are extraordinary in their capability to fight off, the world around us in so many ways. And we can rely on those with a little help from science from time to time, like we find ourselves now. We've lived through, a challenging period of time for everyone, but certainly parents of small children in particular have just borne the brunt of it. Kids not being able to go to school, anxiety levels and depression and all the things that have come with this pandemic are just, they're life changing And it's important for us, during this really, really hard time to latch onto those things that we can have a high degree of confidence in are going to protect us and our children. And I think our conversation today certainly has highlighted that.
And to tag on to Dr. Gray's comment, we want kids in school for many reasons. We also know when kids are out sick, even if you're an A student, you miss school for a week, you're going to have trouble catching up. If you're a borderline student, it's going to seem impossible. So this is another way to keep kids in school, keep the schools open, because there's so many wonderful benefits from school besides the learning.
Absolutely.
I just want to add that this vaccine reduces stress. You know you have that defense inside. You can still wear, you should still wear a mask and still do the things when you're in that setting, but it just gives you such more confidence and reduces stress that you're okay. And so I encourage parents to give that to their children with their pediatrician, consult with their pediatrician, but it is such a wonderful thing to be able to have that assurance.
And again, I vaccinated my teenagers. That tells you what I believe. I've actually shown some parents in clinic when they were on the fence. I actually open up my personal health record. They can see my immunization dates when I got vaccinated. I'm not going to recommend anything that I'm not willing to do.
Yeah. So I think that's a great segue. And I know Jametta is on to let us know that she needs to wrap up. So I want to thank you all for being here. So right now, vaccines are available, and if you guys can just give the affirmative, vaccines are available for young people as young as 5 and as old as 100, or however old the oldest person on the planet is.
160.
160. And right now, you should, like Dr. Fuller said, consult with your pediatrician, but you can get the vaccine for kids 5 to 12 at your pediatrician's office. The health department is now giving them. Are there any other places where families can find the vaccine? CVS is giving them, I think. Is there any other place that you want to highlight that are giving vaccines right now?
No, I think you named them. Local health departments, pharmacies, and pediatrician and family medicine doctor offices for the kids. I would call before you go because some places may not have it yet. This was just approved a short time ago. And some places may choose not to give the vaccine either because of the size of their practice or some practical kind of considerations. But those 3 main areas cover a lot of territory.
Thank you all so much. I needed this. I needed this. And so my pediatrician's office is actually is giving the vaccine. I already got the text message. And so I am going to today make my kids' appointments to make sure that they get vaccinated. So I appreciate
we are really happy to give parents the choice. As I understand it, nobody's being made to do this, but it is a choice. And for those who want to protect their children and should protect their children, we're grateful they have that choice now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Fuller. It is a choice. And I feel very confident now listening to you all that it is a good choice for our family. So thank you so much. And also it just was really exciting to talk to you all. You were so clear, and you all do such amazing work. And it got me really excited about science. So, and science is really cool. So listening to people that deeply understand it always make me really excited. So I'm going to pass it on to Jametta. Thank you all so much for being here with us. And hopefully have you all back.
Because I had to echo everything that you said to thank each of you for how clear and concise your voices are, and everyone who has been in this setting consistently. It shows how important it is to have trusted sources giving you the information, and to hear it multiple times in different ways. And that's why we believe in our COVID313 that we have to continuously talk, continuously engage, and continuously bring different voices to the table, because there still are people with questions. And so today, your voices help Christine Bell and her family make a decision for health and effectively protecting their children and family. And we hope that many, many more are going to do the exact same thing. So again, I just want to echo there's a privilege to have you, and we will be circling back to you because we need your voice to continue to move us forward. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move into the final stages of what I hope you believe too has been a really phenomenal and substantive session that we've had today. And something that should probably be coming to our minds as we talk about COVID, we realize that in order for us to have access to the vaccine, in order for us to have access to healthcare, all of those things are part of what government provides. And the government and the officials that we have come to us as a result of us voting. So you all know, family, that our votes matter. So what I'd like to do is let's move back a little bit to find out what were the outcomes of our local election. And I'm going to ask Molly if she would put up the slide for those of you who may have missed some of those outcomes, if you would. So as you can see on here, we had elections not only for the mayor, the city clerk, and for many of you, there were council people, and their proposals were also discussed. So without spending time on the specifics, we ask you to please take a look at that. Please make sure that whatever the outcomes are, know that whether it's redistricting, which is absolutely critical to make sure that our voices are heard, whether it is having and engaging issues like out of school time, healthcare for all, your voice must be at the table. It's so critical for us. And we want to make sure, if you can make sure that this Detroit elections result is in the chat, save that, share it, get involved. Your vote, your voice matters. We also want to pivot to make sure that Deja Moss, who is our production coordinator, has information for us. We have had a focus on long haulers, and we had a focus on kid vaccines, but we all know that boosters are now part of the arsenal for protection. Deja, if you could share that slide as well. We want everyone to know that the booster shots are available, generally for those who have had Moderna or Pfizer or even Johnson & Johnson 6 months ago. Obviously, if you have a compromised immune system, you need to get in ASAP, but also here's the other information that's useful for you: who is eligible and where you can go. Deja, if you would, please make sure that this slide is also available in the chat. Families, we welcome you to copy that and share this information widely. While we're talking about long haulers, which we understand is a complex issue, it's a relatively new issue, and it's an emerging science. It's perhaps just like COVID may in fact become a chronic reality that we now have to address. The Detroit Parent Network is delighted to have what we call Come Hear Our Stories. Tomorrow at 5 o'clock, we are having a session where folks who have been impacted as a long hauler are going to tell their story. We are doing this consistently. We do it with cancer. We do it with diabetes. We are now saying, if you have had an experience with COVID, whether you are a long hauler or whether you are trying to recuperate, recover emotionally, it's a support group. And tomorrow we're really delighted that Brian Love, who is the Director for Outreach for Education Trust, he is also a DPN long-term and awesome board member. He will be sharing his story of being a long hauler. And that information is in the chat for you. And so with that, I believe that we're wrapping up another informative, substantive, and powerful program that we hope has made you feel much more comfortable, that you have more facts to make good decisions so that you can keep your children safe, healthy, and strong. And with that, like we always do, I'm going to ask all of the members if you would flash come on screen, because this is a collaborative effort. There are folks in the back office, there are folks in front of the screen, and there are folks who are making connections. We want to let you know, and we want to especially thank our presenters for taking time out of their, yes, very busy days to help us inform and engage our community. I'm hoping, I can't see it on my screen, but I'm hoping everybody is out there, all of us, and that we are waving and letting you know, Detroit, stay strong, stay positive. Let's stop COVID and be blessed. Bye-bye.